Vocational education, also known as career and technical education or technical and vocational education and training, is education that prepares people for specific trades, crafts and careers at various levels, from a trade, a craft, technician, or a professional position in engineering, accountancy, nursing, medicine, architecture, pharmacy, law, etc. Craft vocations are usually based on manual or practical activities, traditionally non-academic, related to a specific trade, occupation, or vocation. It is sometimes referred to as technical education as the trainee directly develops expertise in a particular group of techniques. It is not, however, further education. Vocational education may be classified as a teaching procedural knowledge. This can be contrasted with declarative knowledge, as used in education in a usually broader scientific field, which might concentrate on theory and abstract conceptual knowledge, characteristic of tertiary education. Vocational education can be at the secondary, post-secondary level, further education level, and can interact with the apprenticeship system. Increasingly, vocational education can be recognized in terms of recognition of prior learning and partial academic credit towards tertiary education as credit. However, it is rarely considered in its own form to fall under the traditional definition of higher education. Vocational education is related to the age-old apprenticeship system of learning. Apprenticeships are designed for many levels of work, from manual trades to high-knowledge work. However, as the labor market becomes more specialized and economies demand higher levels of skill, governments and businesses are increasingly investing in the future of vocational education through publicly funded training organizations and subsidized apprenticeship or traineeship initiatives for businesses. At the post-secondary level, vocational education is typically provided by an institute of technology, polytechnic, university, or by a local community college. Vocational education has diversified over the 20th century and now exists in industries such as retail, tourism, information technology, funeral services and cosmetics, as well as in the traditional crafts and cottage industries. VET internationally, Australia. In Australia, vocational education and training is mostly post-secondary and provided through the vocational education and training system by registered training organisations. However, some senior schools do offer school-based apprenticeships and traineeships for students in years 10, 11 and 12. There were 24 technical colleges in Australia, but now only 4 independent trade colleges remain, with 2 in Queensland, 1 in Brisbane and 1 on the Gold Coast, and 1 in Adelaide and Perth. This system encompasses both public, TAFE, and private providers in a national training framework consisting of the Australian Quality Training Framework, Australian Qualifications Framework and industry training packages, which define the assessment standards for the different vocational qualifications. Australia Euro unregistered trademark S apprenticeship system includes both traditional apprenticeships in traditional trades and a Euro OE traineeships, a Euro in other more service-oriented occupations. Both involve a legal contract between the employer and the apprentice and provide a combination of school-based and workplace training. Apprenticeships typically last 3 to 4 years, traineeships only 1 to 2 years. Apprentices and trainees receive a wage which increases as they progress. Since the states and territories are responsible for most public delivery and all regulation of providers, a central concept of the system is national recognition, whereby the assessments and awards of any one registered training organization must be recognized by all others, and the decisions of any state or territory training authority must be recognized by the other states and territories. This allows national portability of qualifications and units of competency. A crucial feature of the training package is that the content of the vocational qualifications is theoretically defined by industry and not by government or training providers. A training package is owned by one of 11 industry skills councils which are responsible for developing and reviewing the qualifications. The National Centre for Vocational Education Research, or NCVER, 1, is a not-for-profit company owned by the federal, state and territory ministers responsible for training. It is responsible for collecting, managing, analyzing, evaluating and communicating research and statistics about vocational education and training. the boundaries between vocational education and tertiary education are becoming more blurred. A number of vocational training providers such as NMIT, BHI and WAI are now offering specialized bachelor degrees in specific areas not being adequately provided by universities. Such applied courses include in the areas of equine studies, winemaking and viticulture, aquaculture, information technology, music, illustration, culinary management and many more. Commonwealth of Independent States, the largest and the most unified system of vocational education, was created in the Soviet Union with the professional no-Energy Uchilish and Enicum. But it became less effective with the transition of the economies of post-Soviet countries to a market economy. European Union, education and training is the responsibility of member states, but the single European labour market makes some cooperation on education imperative, including on vocational education and training. The Copenhagen Process, based on the open method of cooperation between member states, was launched in 2002 in order to help make vocational education and training better and more attractive to learners throughout Europe. The process is based on mutually agreed priorities that are reviewed periodically. Much of the activity is monitored by CEDFOP, the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, Finland. In Finland, vocational education belongs to secondary education. After the 9-year comprehensive school, almost all students choose to go to either a Lukio, which is an institution preparing students for tertiary education, or to a vocational school. Both forms of secondary education last 3 years, and give a formal qualification to enter university or ammattikorkeakoulu, that is Finnish polytechnics. In certain fields, the entrance requirements of vocational schools include completion of the Lukio, thus causing the students to complete their secondary education twice. The education in vocational school is free, and the students from low-income families are eligible for a state student grant. The curriculum is primarily vocational, and the academic part of the curriculum is adapted to the needs of a given course. The vocational schools are mostly maintained by municipalities. After completing secondary education, one can enter higher vocational schools or universities. It is also possible for a student to choose both Lukio and vocational schooling. The education in such cases lasts usually from 3 to 4 years. German language areas. Vocational education is an important part of the education systems in Austria, Germany, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, and one element of the German model. For example, in Germany a law was passed in 1969 which regulated and unified the vocational training system and codified the shared responsibility of the state, the unions, associations and chambers of trade and industry. The system is very popular in modern Germany. In 2001, 2/3 of young people aged under 22 began an apprenticeship, and 78% of them completed it, meaning that approximately 51% of all young people under 22 have completed an apprenticeship. 1 in 3 companies offered apprenticeships in 2003. In 2004 the government signed a pledge with industrial unions that all companies except very small ones must take on apprentices. The vocational education systems in the other German-speaking countries are very similar to the German system, and a vocational qualification from one country is generally also recognized in the other states within this area. Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, vocational education is usually for post-secondary 6 students. The Hong Kong Institute of Vocational Education provides training in 9 different vocational fields, namely, applied science, business administration, child education and community services, construction, design, printing, textiles and clothing, hotel, servicing tourism studies, information technology, electrical and electronic engineering, and mechanical, manufacturing and industrial engineering. Hungary. Normally at the end of elementary school students are directed to one of 3 types of upper secondary education, 1 academic track and 2 vocational tracks. Vocational secondary schools provide 4 years of general education and also prepare students for the maturita. These schools combine general education with some specific subjects, referred to as pre-vocational education and career orientation. At that point many students enroll in a post-secondary VET program often at the same institution, to obtain a vocational qualification, although they may also seek entry to tertiary education. Vocational training schools initially provide 2 years of general education, combined with some pre-vocational education and career orientation. They then choose an occupation, and then receive 2 or 3 years of vocational education and training focusing on that occupation such as bricklayer. Students do not obtain the maturity but a vocational qualification at the end of a successfully completed program. Demand for vocational training schools, both from the labor market and among students, has declined while it has increased for upper secondary schools delivering the maturity. India. Vocational training in India is provided on a full-time as well as part-time basis. Full-time programs are generally offered through ITIS industrial training institutes. The nodal agency for granting the recognition to the ITIS is NCVT, which is under the Min of Labour, GOVT, of India. Part-time programs are offered through state technical education boards or universities who also offer full-time courses. Vocational training has been successful in India only in industrial training institutes and that too in engineering trades. There are many private institutes in India which offer courses in vocational training and finishing, but most of them have not been recognized by the government. India is a pioneer in vocational training in film and television, and information technology aft, audio production and recording ILM Academy. Maharashtra state government also offers vocational diplomas in various trades. Vocational higher secondary schools are under MHRD in India. All the state governments runs vocational schools. In Kerala, 389 vocational schools are there with 42 different courses. Commerce and business, tourism, agriculture, automobile, air conditioning, livestock management, lab technician, agriculture are some prominent courses. The students get reservation and preference in PSC appointments. Japanese vocational schools are known as Nihongo Senmangaka. They are part of Japan's higher education system. They are 2-year schools that many students study at after finishing high school. Some have a wide range of majors, others only a few majors. Some examples are computer technology, fashion, and English. South Korea, vocational high schools offer programs in 5 fields: agriculture, technology engineering, commerce business, maritime fishery, and home economics. In principle, all students in the first year of high school follow a common national curriculum. In the second and third years students are offered courses relevant to their specialization. In some programs, students may participate in workplace training through cooperation between schools and local employers. The government is now piloting vocational Meister schools in which workplace training is an important part of the program. Around half of all vocational high schools are private. Private and public schools operate according to similar rules. For example, they charge the same fees for high school education, with an exemption for poorer families. The number of students in vocational high schools has decreased, from about half of students in 1995 down to about 1/4 today. To make vocational high schools more attractive, in April 2007 the Korean government changed the name of vocational high schools into professional high schools. With the change of the name, the government also facilitated the entry of vocational high school graduates to colleges and universities. Most vocational high school students continue into tertiary education. In 2007, 43% transferred to junior colleges and 25% to university. At tertiary level, vocational education and training is provided in junior colleges and at polytechnic colleges. Education at junior colleges and in 2-year programs in polytechnic colleges leads to an industrial associate degree. Polytechnics also provide 1-year programs for craftsmen and master craftsmen in short programs for employed workers. The requirements for admission to these institutions are in principle the same as those in the rest of tertiary sector, but candidates with vocational qualifications are given priority in the admission process. Junior colleges have expanded rapidly in response to demand and in 2006 enrolled around 27% of all tertiary students. 95% of junior college students are in private institutions. Fees charged by private colleges are approximately twice those of public institutions. Polytechnic colleges are state-run institutions under the responsibility of the Ministry of Labour. Government funding keeps student fees much lower than those charged by other tertiary institutions. Around 5% of students are enrolled in polytechnic colleges. Malaysia, skills training are no longer depicted as second-class education in Malaysia. There are numerous vocational education centres here including vocational schools, technic schools and vocational colleges, all of them under the Ministry of Education. Then there are 33 polytechnics and 86 community colleges under the Ministry of Higher Education. 10 MARA Advanced Skills Colleges, 13 MARA Skills Institutes, 286 Jayatmaras under Meli Amana Rakyat and 15 National Youth Skills Institutes under Ministry of Youth and Sports. The first vocational institute in Malaysia is the Industrial Training Institute of Kuala Lumpur, established in 1964 under the Manpower Department. Other institutes under the same department including 8 Advanced Technology Training Centres, 1 Centre for Instructor and Advanced Skill Training, 1 Japan-Malaysia Technical Institute and the other 21 ITIs. Mexico. In Mexico, both federal and state governments are responsible for the administration of vocational education. Federal schools are funded by the federal budget, in addition to their own funding sources. The state governments are responsible for the management of decentralized institutions, such as the State Centers for Scientific and Technological Studies and Institutes of Training for Work. These institutions are funded 50% from the federal budget and 50% from the state budget. The state governments also manage and fund decentralized institutions of the federation, such as CONALEP schools. Compulsory education finishes at the age of 15 and about half of those aged 15 to 19 are enrolled full-time or part-time in education. All programs at upper secondary level require the payment of a tuition fee. The upper secondary vocational education system in Mexico includes over a dozen subsystems which differ from each other to varying degrees in content, administration, and target group. The large number of school types and corresponding administrative units within the Ministry of Public Education makes the institutional landscape of vocational education and training complex by international standards. Vocational education and training provided under the Upper Secondary Education Under-Secretariat includes 3 main types of program. Training for work courses at ISCED 2 level are short training programs, taking typically 3 to 6 months to complete. The curriculum includes 50% theory and 50% practice. After completing the program, students may enter the labor market. This program does not provide direct access to tertiary education. Those who complete lower secondary education may choose between 2 broad options of vocational upper secondary education at ISCED 3 level. Both programs normally take 3 years to complete and offer a vocational degree as well as the baccalaureate, which is required for entry into tertiary education. The title Technical Professional a Euro Baccalaureate is offered by various subsystems, though one subsystem includes 2/3 of the students. The program involves 35% general subjects and 65% vocational subjects. Students are required to complete 360 hours of practical training. The program awarding the Technological Baccalaureate, and the title Professional Technician is offered by various subsystems. It includes more general and less vocational education, 60% general subjects and 40% vocational subjects. The Netherlands, nearly all of those leaving lower secondary school enter upper secondary education, and around 50% of them follow one of 4 vocational programs. Technology, economics, agricultural, personal social services and healthcare. These programs vary from 1 to 4 years. The programs can be attended in either of 2 pathways. One either involving a minimum of 20% of school time or the other, involving a maximum of 80% school time. The remaining time in both cases is apprenticeship work in a company. So in effect, students have a choice out of 32 trajectories, leading to over 600 professional qualifications. BBL apprentices usually receive a wage negotiated in collective agreements. Employers taking on these apprentices receive a subsidy in the form of a tax reduction on the wages of the apprentice level. For graduates of senior secondary VET may go directly to institutes for higher profession education and training, after which entering university is a possibility. The social partners participate actively in the development of policy. As of January 1, 2012, they formed a foundation for cooperation, vocational education and entrepreneurship. Its responsibility is to advise the Minister on the development of the national vocational education and training system, based on the full consensus of the constituent members. Special topics are qualification and examination, apprenticeships and efficiency of VET. The centers of expertises are linked to the 4 vocational education programs provided in senior secondary VET on the content of VET programs and on trends and future skill needs. The local county vocational training represents the VET schools in this foundation and advise on the quality, operations and provision of VET. Source: Dutch Vocational Education in a Nutshell. www.expaticacum Education. Dutch Vocational Education and Training in a Nutshell. 14318 HTML. New Zealand. New Zealand is served by 39 industry training organisations. The unique element is that ITOs purchase training as well as set standards and aggregate industry opinion about skills in the labour market. Industry training, as organised by ITOs, has expanded from apprenticeships to a more true lifelong learning situation with, for example, over 10% of trainees aged 50 or over. Moreover, much of the training is generic. This challenges the prevailing idea of vocational education and the standard layperson view that it focuses on apprenticeships. One source for information in New Zealand is the Industry Training Federation. 2. Another is the Ministry of Education. 3. Polytechnics, private training establishments, Wananga and others also deliver vocational training, amongst other areas. Norway. Nearly all those leaving lower secondary school enter upper secondary education, and around half follow one of 9 vocational programs. These programs typically involve 2 years in school followed by 2 years of apprenticeship in a company. The first year provides general education alongside introductory knowledge of the vocational area. During the second year, courses become more trade-specific. Apprentices receive a wage negotiated in collective agreements ranging between 30% and 80% of the wage of a qualified worker. The percentage increasing over the apprenticeship period. Employers taking on apprentices receive a subsidy, equivalent to the cost of 1 year in school. After the 2 years vocational school program, some students opt for a third year in the A Euro Generale Euro unregistered trademark program as an alternative to an apprenticeship. Both apprenticeship and a third year of practical training in school lead to the same vocational qualifications. Upper secondary VET graduates may go directly to vocational technical colleges, while those who wish to enter university need to take a supplementary year of education. The social partners participate actively in the development of policy. The National Council for Vocational Education and Training advises the Minister on the development of the national vocational education and training system. The advisory councils for vocational education and training are linked to the 9 vocational education programs provided in upper secondary education and advise on the content of TVET programs and on trends and future skill needs. The national curriculum groups assist in deciding the contents of the vocational training within the specific occupations. The local county vocational training committees advise on the quality, provision of VET and career guidance. Paraguay. In Paraguay, vocational education is known as Bachillerato ta Copyright and is part of the secondary education system. These schools combine general education with some specific subjects, referred to as pre-vocational education and career orientation. After 9 years of education cubed en escola básica, the student can choose to go to either a Bachillerato ta Copyright or a Bachillerato Científico. Both forms of secondary education last 3 years, and are usually located in the same campus called Colegio. After completing secondary education, one can enter to the universities. It is also possible for a student to choose both TA copyright KNICO and scientifico schooling. Russia. Sweden. Nearly all of those leaving compulsory schooling immediately enter upper secondary schools, and most complete their upper secondary education in 3 years. Upper secondary education is divided into 13 vocationally oriented and 4 academic national programs. Slightly more than half of all students follow vocational programs. All programs offer broad general education and basic eligibility to continue studies at the post-secondary level. In addition, there are local programs specially designed to meet local needs and individual unregistered trademark programs. A 1992 school reform extended vocational upper secondary programs by 1 year, aligning them with 3 years of general upper secondary education, increasing their general education content, and making core subjects compulsory in all programs. The core subjects include English, artistic activities, physical education and health, mathematics, natural science, social studies, Swedish or Swedish as a second language, and religious studies. In addition to the core subjects, students pursue optional courses, subjects which are specific to each program and a special project. Vocational programs include 15 weeks of workplace training over the 3-year period. Schools are responsible for arranging workplace training and verifying its quality. Most municipalities have advisory bodies, program councils and vocational councils composed of employers unregistered trademark and employers unregistered trademark representatives from the locality. The councils advise schools on matters such as provision of workplace training courses, equipment purchasing, training of supervisors in APU. Switzerland. Nearly 2/3 of those entering upper secondary education enter the vocational education and training system. At this level, vocational education and training is mainly provided through the A dual system unregistered trademark. Students spend some of their time in a vocational school, some of their time doing an apprenticeship at a host company. And for most programs, students attend industry courses at an industry training center to develop complementary practical skills relating to the occupation at hand. Common patterns offer students to spend 1-2 days per week at the vocational school and 3-4 days doing the apprenticeship at the host company. Alternatively, they alternate between some weeks attending classes at the vocational school and some weeks attending industry courses at an industry training center. A different pattern is to begin the program with most of the time devoted to in-school education and gradually diminishing the amount of in-school education in favor of more in-company training. Switzerland draws a distinction between vocational education and training programs at upper secondary level, and professional education and training programs, which take place at tertiary B level. In 2007, more than half of the population aged 25-64 had a VET or PET qualification as their highest level of education. In addition, universities of applied sciences offer vocational education at tertiary A level. Pathways enable people to shift from one part of the education system to another. Turkey. Students in Turkey may choose vocational high schools after completing the 8-year-long compulsory primary education. Vocational high school graduates may pursue 2-year-long polytechnics or may continue with a related tertiary degree. Municipalities in Turkey also offer vocational training. The Metropolitan Municipality of Istanbul, the most populous city in Turkey, offers year-long free vocational programs in a wide range of topics through ISMEK, an umbrella organization formed under the municipality. United Kingdom. The first trade school in the UK was Stanley Technical Trades School, which was designed, built and set up by William Stanley. The initial idea was thought of in 1901, and the school opened in 1907. The system of vocational education in the UK initially developed independently of the state, with bodies such as the RSA and City and Guilds setting examinations for technical subjects. The Education Act 1944 made provision for a tripartite system of grammar schools, secondary technical schools and secondary modern schools, but by 1975 only 0.5% of British senior pupils were in technical schools, compared to 2/3 of the equivalent German age group. Successive recent British governments have made attempts to promote and expand vocational education. In the 1970s, the Business and Technology Education Council was founded to confer further and higher education awards, particularly to further education colleges in the United Kingdom. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Conservative government promoted the Youth Training Scheme, National Vocational Qualifications and General National Vocational Qualifications. However, youth training was marginalised as the proportion of young people staying on in full-time education increased. In 1994, publicly funded modern apprenticeships were introduced to provide quality training on a work-based route. Numbers of apprentices have grown in recent years, and the Department for Children, Schools and Families has stated its intention to make apprenticeships a mainstream part of England's education system. In the UK, some higher technician engineering positions that require 4 to 5 year apprenticeship require academic study to HNC/HND or higher city and guilds level. United States. See also, agricultural education, apprenticeship, internship. European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, community college, constructivism, dual education system, employability, environmental education, family and consumer science, finishing school, further education, Institute of Technology, life skills, renewable energy, technical and further education, training, retraining, vocational school, vocational university, widening participation, Washington County Closed Circuit Educational Television Project, references. 14 Professor Dr. Philip Gannon, Professor Far 1/4 Bierofsbildung, Institut Far 1/4 Erziehungswissenschaft, Universität Currency Tsar 1/4 Ich, further reading, Achilles, C.M. Lintz, M.N. and Wason, W.W. Observations on Building Public Confidence in Education. Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis 11 No. 3, 275-284. Bernack, and Cassidy. The ABC Complete Book of School Marketing. Ray Township, M.I., author, 1996. Bridhead, C.W. Image 2000, A Vision for Vocational Education. Vocational Education Journal 66, No. 1, 22-25. Basel, C.H. Let Our Image Reflect Our Pride. Vocational Education Journal 62, No. 8, 10. Kinshello, Joel. Toil and Trouble, Good Work, Smart Workers, and the Integration of Academic and Vocational Education. New York, Peter Lang Publishing. Kinshello, Joel. How Do We Tell the Workers? The Socioeconomic Foundations of Work and Vocational Education. Boulder, Colorado, Westview Press. Lawglow, John. McLean, Rupert. Vocationalization of Secondary Education Revisited. Series, Technical and Vocational Education and Training, Issues, Concerns and Prospects, Volume 1. Springer, O'Connor, P.J., and Trussell, S.T. The Marketing of Vocational Education. Vocational Education Journal 62, No. 8, 31-32. Rise, E. To be or not to be. For many the word vocational doesn't work. Techniques 72, No. 8, 32-36. Rise, A., and Trout, J. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. New York, HarperCollins Publishers, 1993. Sharp, D. Image Control, Teachers and Staff Have the Power to Shape Positive Thinking. Vocational Education Journal 68, No. 1, 26-27. Shields, C.J. How to Market Vocational Education. Curriculum Review, 3-5, Silberman, H.F. Improving the Status of High School Vocational Education. Educational Horizons 65, No. 1, 5-9. Tultul, F.T. Let's Get Serious About Image Building. Vocational Education Journal 62, No. 8, 11. What Do People Think of Us? Techniques 72, No. 6, 14-15. Asian Academy of Film and Television, Reeves, Diane Lindsay Career Academy Toolkit Raleigh, North Carolina, Bright Futures Press, 2006. 4. External links, profiles of national vocational education systems compiled from a variety of national and international sources, UNESCO UNEVOC International Center for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, Choosing a Career or Vocational School, U.S. Federal Trade Commission, a Babcock, Kendrick C. Education, Industrial. Encyclopedia Americana A Babcock, Kendrick C. Education, Technical. Encyclopedia Americana, Vocational Education at DMOZ.